Hi, and welcome to Drafting Compliance. I'm Kayne, he's Tom, and we were live and in person last time in Texas talking about supply chain risk. I can say the sign arrived from Texas, but I haven't had a chance yet to put it up on the wall. Today, we're talking with our special guest, Steve Gentry, a three-time CISO, based on a conversation we had earlier this year at Black Hat, where we talked about how organizations should plan for changes to control design or operation. But before we get to that, we have some funny looking beers. What are we drinking today, Steve?
Ciders. Ciders are so much better than a regular. I can't do IPAs, and I listened to these previously, Tom. I know you're an IPA fan, but
That's okay.
this,
I'm all for new experiences. This will be new to me. I think I've had a cider once, believe it or not, and that's it. We could
I
not
put
align.
cider in punches.
Yeah, I've had some mixes with cider, that's for sure. We could
Hmm.
not align. Believe it or not, ciders are even hard to align in three geographies than I think craft beer. I tried all week to get either your incline or your strongbow, so I'm going to be the odd man out today. What do you have in your hand, Steve?
Incline. It's a Marionberry cider.
And I have the same. What are you drinking today, Tom?
Something completely different. This is Cider Boys. It's a peach apple cider. So the idea that there's a cider out there with peach in it was intriguing to me because I do like peach tea. So thought I'd give that a try.
Fair enough.
So what do you say we crack our individual drinks and if you're a pour guy, pour it. If you're not, drink it however
Yeah,
you like.
I hope I'm putting this in the right glass, Tom, because I've just got this beer Stein sent. Oh, it's purple. It's purplish. This reminds me already. This is kind of triggering, right? You remember that pink stuff we drank
Yeah, I do.
episodes ago?
A couple of pink
That was
things.
just
Well,
terrible.
mine doesn't look anything like yours. Mine looks
Yeah,
like
well, it smells very, very
a
like.
very light beer.
I can see through mine. Well, mostly see through it.
What
I can
is?
see my lighting setup
I'm
through it.
curious to hear what yours smells like, Kane.
Berries. It smells like berry pie. It's not actually a terrible smell, honestly. Like one of my relatives makes a huckleberry pie every year around Thanksgiving. Yeah, it's really tasty.
I would best describe what I
But
have in my hand as smelling like peach wine. It's got
peach
that.
wine could be all
Yeah,
right.
it's got
It
that.
could also produce a hangover.
Yeah, it's got that real alcohol smell behind the peach, but it's good.
Ooh.
It's interesting.
So do you have another high test one, Tom, like we did in Texas?
I don't know. I didn't even look what the ABV. Oh,
This says
this is only yeah. This
6.5.
is 5%. So
Ah, shoot,
I'm gonna
you're
be
just going to be
fine.
sessioning that all day.
Steve, in Texas, I had a 7.5%, and let me tell you, some of my diction was lost completely.
It's
All
absolutely
right,
fire.
I'm going in.
So
I'm
much
going
fun.
in for
All
a
right,
taste.
let's all have a test of this and see. I like that it fits in my glass, so it's not much of a head.
Hmm. Not at all unpleasant. This is it's effervescent. It's got bubbles to it. So that's
This
the
one's
first
kind of
thing.
flat.
First thing I feel on the tongue is that um, almost a little champagne, I guess, and then all peach. It actually reminds me a little bit of a Bartles and James wine cooler from before I could actually legally drink.
Oh my God, I almost spit that
Okay,
out. That is too funny.
so yeah, that was the '80s when we were like it was the
Yeah.
yeah night train, wine coolers, all the stuff when we were teenagers. Or like that we tried to get
Yeah,
our
a little
hands
Boone's
on
Farm
to
here
keep
and
the beer
there.
cool. And
Yep.
Oh yeah, Boone's Farm. Yep, keeping it an old
Strawberry Hill
Irish red,
wine.
and yeah, yep, yeah, keeping it real around here. Um, what I'll say about this is, it does not taste like it smells. It's sort of sour and kind of tart, actually. Um, it also it reads kind of flat. This is the best beer I've definitely had this week, possibly this month. Also, it's a cider, so
Yeah.
um,
I was gonna say
yeah.
pretty generous definition
Steve,
of
how is
beer.
this? Is this kind of meeting your expectations for what it would taste like? You've had this before, right?
yeah, you're not looking for something that you don't want it to be like a fruit juice. You're not looking for like if it's like a fruit juice and it's a high sugar content. Yeah, it kind of it's I don't know how to describe it that other than that. It's like you are looking for something that's going to have be a little bit flatter, sour, um, some of the ones you have to be careful of, like especially on the apple side, it just feels like it's apple juice, and then you see people drinking them like they're apple juice, and when they're 5.5, 6.5%, and they're pounding them like apple juice, then you can have some interesting conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. You're looking for a little bit more of that bitter or tart sense than you would with.
I definitely have
All
some
right, well, at
tarts.
least it's reading like it should.
Yeah, I think a good rule of thumb is if it comes in a beer bottle, you shouldn't pound it. If it comes in a box with a straw, feel free to just drink as much as you like.
What if it comes in a box with a tap, Tom?
I think that's different as well.
All right, well, we will review these towards the end of the episode. But Steve, we're glad we have you on today. We were talking to Black Hat before the show. What was that, 3 months ago? It feels like a few years ago, but it was still 2023 Black Hat. And I wanted you to lead off our conversation with some common challenges that organizations face when they're updating or changing their controls to align with FedRAMP requirements.
Yeah, so one of the things that makes me chuckle about FedRAMP is people always put FedRAMP in a category in and of itself, and I try and remind people FedRAMP is still just a compliance framework. Remember, you're just dealing with a compliance framework. One of the other common mistakes I see people make when they're starting off or when they're making changes is they try and be like politicians. They're trying to attach something to the back of the bill in order to get it slipped through and just convince people, oh no, this is yeah, that's fine, just nothing to see here. Don't look at the back page, but we're gonna do all of these things. So my first recommendation, whenever you're making changes, stick to what the control is. Mm-hmm. Yes, you're always going to have security activities you need to fix. Yes, you're always going to have continual process improvement you need to make. Remember that you're on a continual process improvement path, but be true to what that control means to your organization and stick to that instead of trying to sneak something else in that you've been trying to get engineering to do, or you've been trying to get another organization to take care of at the same time. You're like, oh, well, this is close to, because if you get caught doing that, I mean, the heads of these other organizations, they're not idiots. They're a lot of times they want to see the controls. They want to walk through it. If they think that you're trying to pull a fast one on them, you're harming your relationship. So stick to the controls. Pay attention to what you're trying to accomplish, because it is a compliance framework. I'm sure you've said this many times in and of yourself, but compliance is not security. So what are you trying to accomplish with this change? What is the end goal of this change? Mm-hmm. It should be an iteration on what you're doing. It should be helping you move along the compliance path. It should be helping you make improvements, whether you're baby stepping. Sometimes you got bigger changes that you're making along your compliance path or your security program path, but limit the scope to that. And I don't mean that if you've got things that are likely aligned or closely aligned that you can't see if you can work through it together, mm-hmm. or if you have complementary changes and you're talking to engineering like, hey, I know this is outside of FedRAMP, but we've got this other thing that we're working on. If we do this one thing, it will cover both of these controls. So the second thing I would say, find ways to get the biggest bang for your buck by getting wins for your organization, by able to combine a couple of things if you can. And I know I just said don't tack on a bunch of stuff. Right. What I'm talking about is don't try and pull a fast one on things, but actually try and combine work. So your engineering thing is getting a 2-for-1 or 3-for-1 anytime that they can.
And Tom, we're probably going through a bit of that right now with the Rev 4 to Rev 5 updates, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as we look at the healthy list of controls associated with the FedRAMP moderate, you're exactly right. Don't push it through piecemeal. Push it through in bundles so folks understand that this is sort of all encompassing and they don't have to touch the same application 5 times, right? So I think that's really smart. On your point about it's just another compliance framework, the only caveat I would add to that is certainly FedRAMP brings a level of diligence that most folks are not particularly used to having. If you're just a SOC 2 shop or an ISO shop, that's generally an annual scramble. With FedRAMP, you're going to see a monthly conmon, and you're really going to want to move your operations towards continuous instead of just annual. So I do think there's a little nuance there, but I think you're exactly right. Don't be bewildered by the name FedRAMP. It is just a set of controls, and it is just a compliance framework.
And just for our viewers
Yeah,
there,
and it's
Tom used the term conmon. If you look up our old episodes for continuous monitoring, I'm pretty sure we can put a link to that as well. But we've already talked about continuous monitoring and about the perspective that this is not a one and done or done annually, but this is really on a continuous spectrum.
it's also why I like to. So typically with organizations I work at, I'm primarily running the security programs at SaaS companies, and so you have your SOC 2 international companies. The international audience always loves their ISO 27001. So I always stagger. I do my SOC 2 at one point in the year, and then 6 months later, I'm doing my ISO. So you're in this regular cycle of like, I've got different auditors for each, and it helps you in that continued process improvement. And so if you're in that cycle of like, hey, I'm already not doing just a one and done trying to scamble. If you're looking at these tools, I happen to know one that I've used in the past that happens to do some automated testing and be able to do these, create these links where it's pulling in data for you, so you can do. Just
He sounds
can't
like
think
he's
of the name off the
describing
top of my
shameless plug
head.
at this
Appreciate
point,
that.
Tom. Yeah, it sounds exactly like us.
Been a Hyperproof customer, but this is what I love about the current. I'm going to go back in time for a little bit. I started my GRC implementations were Archer. Those were the first implementations I did. Multiple companies, multiple implementations when I was a consultant of implementing Archer. I really love the brand of GRC tools that are out now, like Hyperproof. You've got a couple of competitors out there that I've also seen doing really good things. That it's the focus on like how much can we automate, how much can we pull in, so you're in that continual process improvement. So if you're already building that program of continual process improvement, if you're already building a tune of continually monitoring your things instead of waiting and doing the scramble there, or the bunch ball mentality where it's like watching little kids play soccer, where it's all of your GRC team latching on to HR for a couple of weeks just before the auditors show up.
I love that visual. That's fantastic.
It's a bad way to run the program, and you typically piss people off. But with the tools that we have nowadays, this shouldn't be a thing. Like, this is why FedRAMP, I think, is getting easier to implement, because it's been around long enough that tools like Hyperproof are making it easier to understand. The GRC world, for the ones who are actually looking at modern GRC programs and not these big behemoth with 11 different components that you don't implement more than 2 of them, but you just spend. I won't.
But I think FedRAMP also, it's getting easier, but it's still not free. And something else I remember you and I had chatted about at Black Hat was the financial considerations that an organization might face when they're making their changes to FedRAMP compliance.
Yeah. One of the things we're just talking about GRC tools is, are you using a GRC tool? Does your GRC tool handle FedRAMP compliance component? Or are you still running off of spreadsheets? I do remember the days that it was easier to not use Archer and to just use a spreadsheet to track my compliance controls. And we were doing the manual mapping of like, okay, well, we're doing SOC 2. This is before SOC 2. We're doing our SSAE 16 audit, and we've got our ISO audit, and let's map how these controls. And you're going that and like, okay, now we're going to add FedRAMP in. How does this all map up? And we're doing it through spreadsheet. We're tracking it. We're sending out the spreadsheets to everyone. So GRC tool, if you're not running one, or if you don't have one that has FedRAMP controls, that to me, that's the first one you want. You do not want to be manually monitoring.
Well, because that's really going to drive up your labor costs.
Exactly. I was just going to make that point, Kayne. You're actually saving money generally by implementing a good tool to manage the routine pieces of the compliance march. So I agree.
And those routine pieces, of course, are evidence collection, evidence testing, but also, just going back to Steve's point, I was also, when I was doing executive advisory, I had so many associate consultants spend countless hours doing mapping between, well, I've got PCI and I need to do HIPAA, and now I need to do ISO, and so many spreadsheets getting binned together. It's nice that's such a routine thing. Modern tools like Hyperproof can do that automatically and also reuse that compliance evidence. So Steve, as you said, when you do your ISO at the 6-month mark and you do your SOC 2 at the 12-month mark, you may as well reuse the same evidence you've been collecting as opposed to coming up with some brand new process, right? That just doesn't make sense from a business perspective.
I mean, whether you're talking about IT, engineering, HR, whoever the organization you're talking to that you need to get evidence out of, if you can come to them, one, if you can automate the process, hallelujah, they will name their firstborn child after you to take that off their plate. Or if you can come to them on very limited times, they're like, okay, this isn't an automated process. We need to collect this, and we've got this data, and you're doing that on a regular basis. Or as they're doing their regular jobs and they can dump data into a folder, and you can just go grab it and like, hey, I've already got it here. I already had to grab it for ISO. Now I've got it for my SOC. It simplify. You will be the hero of the day. And we always need, like, security often is the bad.
Yeah, that's not often the common
evil,
thing
bad
for
person.
the security department, although we are getting away from
Yeah.
being the department of no to finally being a business enabler. But I love that becoming the hero of the day.
Yeah, just find ways that, like, what is that win that you can get for them? Make their life easier as you're going through this audit. And then as you're doing things like that, if you're talking about, hey, here's the cost if we're doing all of this manually. So you need to, when you're talking cost, you need to be data driven. What's the cost of running this process manually? Here's the cost of a GRC tool. Here's what we can do. Work with your vendor to help build some of that ROI out there. Like, hey, here's where we can automate these processes, save time. The second piece is how mature is your security or compliance organization? If you have a very young organization, if you're running a very small team and you have like one compliance analyst, should you be going and getting an advisor to help guide you through this process and paying a third-party company to help consult and help guide you through that process? If you have a more mature organization, they've gone through that FedRAMP process before, they're like, hey, we don't really need to have the pre-audit consultant come in. We'll just get the 3PAO and we'll be ready to go. They'll do some work with us and make sure that we're prepared. But like, how many companies it was that cost going through this previously, that cost of, we have our pre-3PAO consultant, and then we have our 3PAO certification firm that we're going to be working with. We've got to have two of them, one of them prepping us just so we're a lot farther ahead by the time we talk to the 3PAO. But being two different companies, they're going to have different thoughts, and so you're going to be doing some tweaking things. So the consulting costs and the certification process is going to be one of a second portion of that you need to plan. And those are some easy ones because you can go get bids from consulting firms. You can help get that out. Some of the harder costs to understand, one is the time suck that is going to be on different departments of the organization as you're going through the controls. Like, if you can narrow it down to like, hey, I think it's going to be this many hours a week. Like, get a good project manager. If you're not good at project management, have a project manager assigned, walk through that process with them, see if you can build out hours it's going to take. So they can figure out how much time impact, because that is a cost, because it's taken away from other work, but this is the cost of the company by having resources being allocated to something else. And then lastly, that cost, well, not lastly, I'm sure there's plenty of other things, but one of the other big things that's top of mind for me, so number 4, is that engineering cost. If you need to modify your product, you need to modify your controls. So those organizations that are monitoring that technology that need to either be updated, like, hey, we're running Java 6 still. Hopefully not, but maybe Java 8, because there's still plenty of companies doing that. You're going to, like, we're going to have to do a bunch of upgrades to our system to be able to modify and do things that we need to do to meet these controls. And being clear about what the control is that you're trying to accomplish. Again, don't try to pull the wool over their eyes. Don't try and backdoor stuff in on this one, but be clear, like, this is why we're trying to accomplish this. This is what we need to do in order to meet this control set. If this doesn't happen, the 3PAO won't be able to get us through. So what do we need to modify about our environment?
I think that's,
and even
I think that's really smart. I mean, I think a lot of folks that are familiar with compliance frameworks walk in and they think this is another SOC 2 exercise. So they start to frame their cost structure around SOC 2. I've seen that at the leadership level. You need somebody to come in and really educate what it means to go through FedRAMP and make sure they understand that, you know, where you're used to paying $25,000 a year on SOC 2, you're really talking about a number that is many times multiplied just to get the consulting that you need for FedRAMP. Additionally, you need to understand that because of the continuous monitoring piece of this, you have to implement your controls in a different way than you used to implementing. And that means a burden on your operations teams, your engineering teams, to your point. And probably 70% of those controls sit in those folks' hands. They don't sit in the security team's hands. It sits in their hands to implement. It sits in our hands to monitor.
So I'm also thinking of our recent episode, Tom, where we talked about supply chain risk. And when I'm thinking about costs and I'm thinking about control changes, Steve, how would organizations work with their third-party vendors to ensure that any changes in their controls aren't going to uh, um, compromise their FedRAMP compliance?
Yeah, so this is I talked about this recently. I'm going to do a shameless plug for a video that I put out a couple weeks ago about third-party risk management. Because I think we've lost our way on it. We've been trying to offload all of the risk and responsibility through our vendors and not taking the responsibility in-house. So when we're looking at that, we should be able to map out what that risk is from those vendors. If we've already done that due diligence process, one, it's having the conversation, making your vendors, and if you do anything in Europe and you've got privacy related, you should know what all your sub processors are off the top of your head. These are your key components that are helping run the product that you need to go have the conversation with. Hey, we're heading down the FedRAMP path. Be clear, you're not telling your vendors that they need to go get FedRAMP certified. As someone on the other end of that, I had multiple people going, oh, well, we're selling to the federal government. You need to be FedRAMP. Like, we're your revenue tool. We're not being used by the government. We don't. And so I had to actually get the GSA FedRAMP office involved and on the conversation with this vendor who kept telling me hey, we're going to cancel our contract if you don't get FedRAMP certified. Mm-hmm. So be clear about what your ask is for them, but give them the heads up that this is the path we're going down, and if there's any changes to be made, you're mapping that out. So include that early on in your project process to have those conversations that you're doing your own risk assessment on that vendor yourself. So if you do have concerns, you do have issues that you are going to have to go back and have the conversation with them on, that you're going back. One of the things I would put out there that is a risk that is often overlooked is that not hidden access, but often talked about access that your SaaS vendor has to your data. So if you're running a product and you have SaaS vendors that you're using, most of them for the purposes of bug fixes or customer support, whether it's something that they have to request access from you or that they are automatically have it and you just have to tell them hey, look into those things on those tools. Most SaaS vendors have some way of getting to your data behind the scene. Mm-hmm. Beware of that fact. Think about what that impact is. Is it controlled by you? Do they have to get access? When I was at Workfront, we had our support people, when they were working on a ticket and they needed to get into the customer instance, they had to put in a request through the tool's admin console. An admin of the instance had to click accept, and they defined how long they were given access for. It was a time bomb token, and then they were granted access. They could do what they need to do, and then it was done. You have other vendors that it's not like that. They just have access. So be aware of what access your third-party vendors have into that data, because you may have now created a nice, lovely backdoor. If you're running a SaaS product and you've got government data in there, but yet you have this third party who can access that data without your knowledge. Those are some of the big things as you're thinking about your sub-processors, your third-party vendors. It's be aware, do your own due diligence. Don't make it their problem. Do your own due diligence to figure out what the risks they provide to your organization, and then go find out some of that access piece, because to me, that is one of those most skipped discussions that ever happen in SaaS software.
Great.
Definitely.
How do you have access to my data?
Great point.
Tom, there's a lot of nuance there. Wow.
Yeah, you said a lot in a little bit there, Steve. So I just want to pack a couple things. It's interesting to think about your vendors in the context of your security boundary, and I think that's really what you're getting at when you said there's some vendors that don't need to walk with you along your FedRAMP journey, but there's certainly vendors that will need to do that. It's really dependent upon the boundary that you've set. And the way I think about it in FedRAMP is, if you are a sub-processor within the boundary, you better be FedRAMP moderate if you're going for moderate yourself. We certainly have instances in our boundary where we had to replace vendors because of that. But for instance, if to your point, your revenue platform is not integrated into your platform and not in boundary, there's no reason to go after that. I've had that same discussion several times where folks in our own RevOps organization were worried that those products needed to move to FedRAMP moderate, and I can clearly denote with a nice drawing where that line sits and why those products are not within scope. So I think that was really smart, and I just wanted to kind of outline, I think, where the nuance at.
Yeah, definitely
Yeah.
there. And if you're enjoying this conversation on YouTube, ring the bell to get notifications about my quest to find literally any beer that's drinkable, or subscribe to this in your podcast app of choice to make this part of your monthly routine. So, Steve, I had a couple last questions before we wrap for the day. And I wanted to ask how organizations can assess the potential impacts associated with changing a control, and really what factors they should consider during their decision-making process.
And this is where I'm going to go back to, and Tom, I'm 100% agree with you. I'm going to restate my statement of FedRAMP is a compliance framework. Keep that in mind as you're going through this. It's just like whether you're modifying SOC, whether you're modifying ISO, FedRAMP, it's that same mindset. Be thoughtful of the impact that it has. And yes, like I always tell people in organizations, like, hey, should we go get FedRAMP? I'm like, hey, do you want $1 million buy-in to start off with? Because that's just the mindset you got to start off with, of like, expect about $1 million and it's going to grow from there as we do more of our due diligence. So as you're looking at that control framework, as you're looking about modifying controls, this is one of those things. It's I would say it's probably one of the least mature processes of any GRC program. Is we look at things about how we're getting compliant, and we'll go through and we'll do those steps, but we don't often pay attention through the time, which is why I started doing the offset of my compliance audits coming in and out. Is we make changes throughout the year. Your company is going to continue growing. If you're in hyper growth mode, some of those companies out there, there's a vendor out there that grew so fast that they actually made it in the Guinness Book of World Records. I'm sure you know the vendor that I'm talking about in the security space here. Can you imagine how much of their business changed in that year to be able to support that growth? As you're one of these hyper growth companies that clearly grow, we were into the pandemic, and this has changed recently as economy we had the economic downturn, it hit the recession. Like we were at 67% growth year over year. It was just, we were adding resources, we were adding customers, we were adding people. We went from, I was at employee 265, and then we hit employee 800 like a year and a half later. And so you're at this point where you've got so many more people involved in the process. So I know this is very rambling on this aspect, but it's one of these things when you're looking at change controls, whether you need to change the control or whether you need to go back and assess whether controls have changed. It's not just because, hey, FedRAMP came out and went from Rev 4 to Rev 5. It's how is your business functioning? Mm-hmm. Are you still doing the things the same way today as you were 6 months ago? Or if you're really good fast growth, like 3 months ago, a month ago, like how many people are now in this process? You say, oh, well, we only have 4 admins who have access to this. Well, that was great when you had a company of 200. Now you have a company of 1,000 and you've got 12 or you've got 20. Or they started doing these things like I've come into companies and like, oh, well, when we started off, we created a profile for engineers and this is the access we got. That's great. We're now several hundred employees into it and all engineers are still getting the same access as the first employees.
Oh boy. That's
and so they all like they have access to everything. Yeah. And so he's like, oh, who's got root access to the DBs? Well, that's 220 engineers, including the brand new first year right out of uni engineers who've never actually worked in a real job or never actually worked at a job, but now for some reason we've given them full.
I've always said a good measure is does your CEO still have admin rights in your Active Directory or your Office 365 instance, right?
Yeah, that's definitely not a best practice. And I think that's the last question I want to ask Steve, and maybe Tom, you've got some perspective on this too, because we've discussed like some things that you should not do, and I think that's important. But I want to pivot that and say, if there are any best practices you can share for organizations that are looking to adjust their control design to meet new or to meet updated FedRAMP criteria.
Yeah, best practices. I think I'd go back to some of the conversations we had of bundling. Mm-hmm. Looking at the way, especially with the way Rev 5 moved, where it started bundling some of these controls. What are you bundling internally that you can go make changes? You can make processes simpler. the KISS model, keep it simple, stupid. Like how much of our compliance framework, and this is why I highly recommend tools
Mhm.
like using a GRC tool, helping automate this process for you as much as it can, keeping your team from doing things, because one of those best practices is keeping is going with the KISS model. Like how do we bundle this together to achieve these controls in the easiest way possible? Don't complicate it, just keep it simple. Like help these people have a win in their life. Stop being the be the hero of the day by having things where you're taking stuff off of people's plates. So how can you bundle some of these controls to simplify it for the control owners and give them back time? Because as you're doing things like that and they see that you actually give a crap about their job and you're not just coming in like, oh, you need to do this because security said so, because of FedRAMP, because of FedRAMP.
Mhm.
The other piece of that is going along with that same statement is I try and keep the compliance aspect out of it. I tie it back to a business objective that we're trying to accomplish, a business, how we're trying to grow the
Love
business.
that.
So I don't say we're doing this because of FedRAMP. I don't say we're doing this because of ISO or SOC 2. It is we're doing this because we need to continually improve our business as we're growing. We've got bigger customers, they have higher expectations of us. So as we improve our business, and we're moving along this path, here's some things we need to adjust and improve upon. Here's some of the things that our customers are asking for and expecting out of us. And turning it into a revenue discussion and a business growth discussion, not a complaint.
I think that's really smart, Steve. The point I'd make is, when you think about the KISS model, sometimes what is thought of as simple is not. Manual processes are very rarely simple, and they're often, kind of wrought with mistakes or potential for mistakes. So one of the things I always say is if you're designing a new control, design automation into the control as much as possible. If you can take out the human element, not only do you speed up the process, make it more efficient, you cut the cost in it as well over the long haul. So anything I can do to remove the potential for human mistake and the need for human intervention, I'm going to do that when I design my control stack. Of course, there's always going to be pieces you can't automate, but to the extent that you can automate it.
Yeah, and I love that this is also a conversation about business and cybersecurity being a business enabler, not about compliance for compliance sake or FedRAMP because FedRAMP, but actually this is tied back to a material objective that the company has agreed to work towards. Because as we've said, I think throughout this series, there's some cost here, and I really do appreciate the perspective, especially now that Rev 4 is out and Rev 5 is in. This is a very timely conversation for us to have on how to update our controls. But with that, I think we're supposed to be doing cider reviews next at the
Yours
end of
looks
this.
pitifully dranken, Kane. It doesn't even look like you've sipped it.
Did you say dranken,
Dranken.
Tom?
I think that's an official word. Done drunken.
I think dranken
something.
is a new official word from you. 5 point what % you said?
It's only 5. Yeah, I should have a lunch every time before I drink, but I just want to compare. I mean, I've touched mine.
This is kind of about normal, but usually I also take a sip. So why don't you start in on your review, and I'll try another sip and see how this has changed over time.
So I'll say this. So I'm drinking something different. I'm drinking Peach Country by Cider Boys. It's very interesting. I'm going to stick with my, initial review, and this tastes a lot like a Bartles and James did back in the 80s. So those who are listening that know that taste, you'll be familiar with it. It's not unpleasant to drink. Neither were the Bartles and James back in the day. It's still not as interesting to me as a beer or to my palate as an IPA. But this is easy to drink. It's not hard to drink. It's something that if I'm over at somebody's house and they offer it to me, I'm not going to say no. I mean, it tastes like peach and apple. It's not hard to drink at all. I would get Kane. I would probably give this a 5 because I'm not going to go seek it, but it's certainly drinkable.
I think, Tom, you and I are coming to even though we're drinking completely different things, I will say this, the flavor profile on this has not changed. It reminds me, funny enough, kind of reminds me of a very light red wine with a fruit, like a berry bouquet, in that it's not really carbonated. It's a little bit sour. There's a little bit of bitterness there. There's not a lot of depth going on, so not a high tannin count if I was to be thinking of this as a red wine. I'm going to put this in at a 5. It is inoffensive. It's not terrible. I certainly, like you, would not seek it out, but Steve, I want to thank you for suggesting it, as this is probably one of the better beers that I've had on the show, even though it is a cider. Steve, how are you going to rate this one on a 10-point scale?
Well, I'm just glad that I could ever, for the first time in my life, be associated with the word inoffensive. So this is, I mean, usually if it's in a different connotation, if inoffensive is used in me, and it's that I'm not, but yeah. So to me, it a little bit fruitier than I would go for. But still, I'm higher on the ciders, so I would put this closer, or doing it on a
Yep.
scale of
On
10.
a scale of 10.
To me, to me, it's more of a
A
7.
7. Okay. Fantastic. 2 5s and a 7. And that's all for today. If you think you know a beer I'd like, or if you have a FedRAMP question, drop it in the comments below. And remember to like our LinkedIn and YouTube pages to hear live interviews with information security professionals. With that, Steve, thanks so much for joining Tom and I today, and really enjoyed having you on the show.
Thank you. Pleasure meeting you, Tom. Kayne, it's great to see you again.
Steve. Thank you.